The chamber exploded with laughter. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood motionless at the podium while 300 alien delegates howled, chittered, and bellowed their amusement across the grand hall of the Galactic Senate. Her proposal lay rejected on the floor, literally trampled by a Vraxian counselor, who had stomped across it moments earlier. The eldest prime, a towering figure with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns, raised one appendage to silence the crowd. The gesture only brought more laughter. "Humans," the prime said, mandibles clicking in what passed for a smile among his species, "you offer military protection to the Senate. You who have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. You whose ships number in the mere thousands. This is the funniest petition we have received in 6 cycles." Lisa's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Behind her, Captain Jake Morrison and Commander Helen Price stood at attention, their dress uniforms crisp despite the 3-day journey to reach this station at the galaxy's core. "Perhaps," a Quellan senator called out, her voice dripping with condescension, "the humans could protect us from asteroid fields, or maybe space debris. That seems more their level." The chamber erupted again. Lisa felt Jake's presence shift slightly behind her, tension radiating from him like heat. She knew that feeling. Every human in the delegation knew it. That particular flavor of rage that came from being underestimated, dismissed, treated like children playing at adult affairs. The Phylaxian representative stood, his bulk making the platform groan. "We appreciate the entertainment, Ambassador Carter, truly. In these troubling times, with the Kralek swarm approaching our outer territories, we needed a good laugh. Your species has provided that. The session is adjourned." More laughter. More casual dismissal. Lisa gathered her documents with careful, deliberate movements. She straightened, turned, and walked toward the exit. Jake and Helen fell into step beside her. The other human diplomats followed, 12 men and women who had spent months preparing this proposal, who had traveled across half the galaxy to present it. Not one of them looked back. Not one of them spoke. The eldest prime called after them. "Ambassador Carter, surely you understand. We mean no disrespect to your kind. You are simply too new, too small to contribute meaningfully to galactic defense. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have matured as a civilization." Lisa reached the massive doors of the Senate chamber. Her hand touched the control panel. She paused for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for the chamber to fall silent, for every delegate to lean forward expecting some final plea or indignant response. Instead, she pressed the button. The doors hissed open. The human delegation walked through without a single word, without a backward glance, without any acknowledgement that the Galactic Senate still existed behind them. The doors sealed shut with a finality that somehow felt heavier than the laughter had been. In the sudden silence of the chamber, something shifted. The eldest prime felt it first, a cold sensation creeping along his crystalline spine that had nothing to do with temperature. Aboard the human vessel Liberty's Edge, Lisa Carter strode through the corridors with purpose that made junior officers step aside before she reached them. Jake caught up to her outside the communications bay, his expression grim. "Ambassador, we need to discuss next steps." The Senate's rejection was more hostile than anticipated. "If we're going to salvage diplomatic relations, we should consider a modified proposal, perhaps through back channels with the more sympathetic delegates." Lisa stopped walking. She turned to face Jake, and he saw something in her eyes that made him straighten involuntarily. It was not anger, not frustration. It was calculation, cold and precise. "Recall every human vessel operating in Senate-protected space," she said quietly. "Every mining operation, every trade convoy, every research station within their territories. I want them gone within 48 hours. Jake blinked. "Ambassador, that's over 600 ships and installations. The economic impact alone would be massive. Not to mention the political message it sends. That is exactly the message I intend to send, Captain." Helen appeared from the communications bay, tablet in hand. "Ambassador, we're receiving priority transmissions from the colonial governors. They're asking for clarification on our next move. Earth wants a full report within the hour. Tell the governors to begin immediate withdrawal protocols. Tell Earth that humanity is done asking for permission." Lisa took the tablet from Helen's hands and began typing. "And send this to every human ship, station, and settlement in the galaxy." Helen read the message as it appeared on the screen. Her eyes widened. "Ambassador, this is a complete withdrawal order, not just from Senate space. From all cooperative ventures with Senate species, trade agreements, scientific partnerships, cultural exchanges, everything." "Correct. But our economy is integrated with theirs. Our supply chains, our research programs. Some colonies depend on trade with Senate worlds for basic necessities." Lisa met her gaze steadily. Then those colonies will learn what humans do best. They will adapt, they will improvise. They will survive without anyone's help, just like our ancestors did for hundreds of thousands of years before we met a single alien species. Jake ran a hand through his hair. You're isolating us, making us pariahs. No, Captain. I am reminding the galaxy what we truly are. Lisa handed the tablet back to Helen. Execute the order, and inform our fleet commanders that all standing defense commitments to Senate worlds are hereby terminated. If the Senate does not want our protection, they will not have it. The next 36 hours transformed the galactic landscape. Human ships vanished from Senate space like ghosts, leaving behind empty docking bays and abandoned facilities that had been operational mere hours before. Trade routes that had relied on human efficiency collapsed. Research stations studying phenomena that only humans seemed capable of investigating went dark. Defense patrols that had quietly protected Senate shipping lanes for the past decades simply disappeared. The Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. The eldest Prime stood before a chamber far less jovial than it had been 2 days earlier. This is absurd, the Thalaxian representative declared. The humans are throwing a tantrum because we rejected their overreaching proposal. They will return when their wounded pride heals. They have terminated 63 trade agreements, a Quellan economist reported, her voice shaking slightly. My homeworld's medical supply chain just collapsed. We relied on human pharmaceutical production for 70% of our antibiotics. We will find new suppliers, the Thalaxian said dismissively. In time, perhaps. But, Senator, people will die in the interim. The humans were fulfilling contracts they could have legally maintained for another 8 months. They are choosing to leave immediately, eating massive financial penalties to do so. This is not about pride. This is about something else. The oldest Prime felt that cold sensation again. What are the humans doing with their recalled vessels? An intelligence officer stepped forward, a smaller species whose name translated roughly as Observer. Prime, they are repositioning. Our scouts report massive fleet movements toward the human core worlds and their frontier territories. They appear to be establishing a defensive perimeter. Defensive? Against what? Against everything, Prime? They are treating the entire galaxy as a potential threat. A younger delegate, a Varaxian who had not been present at the previous session, spoke up. Forgive my ignorance, but I have reviewed the human proposal that was rejected. They offered to deploy their fleet to help defend against the Krelix swarm. This seems prescient. The swarm has accelerated its approach. Current projections show it reaching Senate outer territories in less than 3 months, not 6 as originally estimated. The chamber fell silent. The Thalaxian representative cleared his throat. The Krelix are a known threat. We have protocols, defense fleets, planetary shields. We do not need human assistance to handle a swarm of organic ships, no matter how numerous. Senator, the observer said carefully, the humans have been tracking the Krelix for 18 months. Their proposal included tactical data we did not review because we dismissed it as irrelevant. I took the liberty of analyzing it after their departure. And the humans know something we do not. Their projected swarm numbers are 4 times higher than our own intelligence estimates. If they are correct, our defense fleets are catastrophically unprepared. The eldest Prime's crystalline structure seemed to dim. How certain are you of this assessment? The human data is thorough, Prime. Detailed. They have been studying the swarm with an intensity that suggests they view it as an existential threat, not just to Senate worlds, but to all spacefaring life. Then we must contact them immediately. Reopen negotiations. The observer shifted uncomfortably. We have tried, Prime. All channels to Human Diplomatic Corps return the same automated message. Humanity is no longer accepting communications regarding Senate matters. They suggest we direct our inquiries to individual human governments if we have specific bilateral concerns. Bilateral? The Thalaxian laughed, but it sounded forced. They are fragmenting our unified approach, trying to deal with us piecemeal. No, Senator, the Quellan economist said quietly. They are not trying to deal with us at all. 5 weeks later, the Krelix swarm reached the outer territories. The first world to fall was Thalaxos Minor, a mining colony of 40,000 souls. The defense fleet engaged the swarm with confidence. Their ships equipped with the finest weapons Senate science could produce. They destroyed the first wave easily. Then the second wave arrived, and the third, and the fourth. By the time the defenders realized the true scale of what they faced, it was too late. The swarm consumed Thalaxos Minor in 16 hours. No survivors. No structures left standing. Nothing but a barren rock stripped of anything organic. The distress calls reached the Senate within minutes. The eldest prime authorized the mobilization of the full defense fleet, 3,000 ships representing the combined military might of 73 civilizations. They would make their stand at Quellan Prime, a heavily fortified world with planetary shields that had never been breached in 20 years of recorded history. The swarm arrived 6 days later. The human intelligence estimates had been wrong. They had underestimated the swarm's numbers. 20 million organic ships blotted out the stars, each one a living nightmare of teeth and claws and insatiable hunger. The Senate fleet lasted 4 hours. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display from the Bridge of Liberty's edge, now positioned in high orbit above Earth. The defense perimeter humanity had established was formidable. Every available ship pulled back to protect the core worlds and most vital colonies. It was a defensive posture born from centuries of human history, the instinct to circle the wagons when surrounded by hostiles. "Sir, we're receiving breakthrough transmissions from Quellan Prime," the communications officer reported. "They're begging for assistance. The swarm has breached their planetary shields. Casualties are in the millions and climbing." Jake's hands tightened on the armrests of his command chair. He had friends on Quellan Prime. Scientists he had worked with, traders he had shared drinks with, ordinary people who had treated him with kindness and respect during his diplomatic postings. "Acknowledged," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Logged the transmission. No response. The young officer turned to face him, shock evident on her face. "Sir, they're dying down there." "I am aware, Lieutenant. We could reach them in 3 days at maximum burn. The Fifth Fleet is only 2 days out. We could save millions of lives." "The Fifth Fleet has orders to maintain defensive positions around the Centauri colonies. Those orders stand." "But Captain, Lieutenant Chen," Jake said quietly, using her name to make it personal, to make it real, "I understand what you are feeling because I feel it too. Every human in this fleet feels it. But our orders are clear. We defend human space. Nothing else." The Senate made their choice when they laughed at our offer to help. Now they face the consequences of that choice. Another officer spoke up, an older man named Paul Grant who had served in 3 combat zones. "Captain, with respect, we are not talking about politicians.
We are talking about civilians.
Children, families, people who had no say in how the Senate treated us." Jake stood, walking to the viewport where Earth hung in all its blue and white glory. "You are correct, Commander Grant. And you know what else? When the swarm inevitably turns its attention to human space, those same civilians will not lift a finger to help us, because their leaders will make the same calculations about resources and strategic priorities that we are making now. The Senate is responsible for protecting the Senate citizens. We are responsible for protecting humanity. That is how this works." "That is how they work," Grant said. "I thought we were supposed to be better." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Jake turned to face his crew, seeing the conflict written on every face. These were good people. Decent people. The kind of humans who had joined the diplomatic and exploration services because they believed in something bigger than themselves, in the dream of peaceful cooperation among the stars. "You want to know what makes us better?" Jake asked. "It is not self-sacrifice. It is not offering help to those who mock us. What makes us better is that we learn. The galaxy has taught us a harsh lesson. We are alone out here. The other species will take our aid when convenient and discard us when we ask for the smallest acknowledgement in return. I will not send human men and women to die for people who considered us a joke." Lisa Carter's voice crackled over the ship-wide intercom. "All ships, this is Ambassador Carter. I know what you are hearing. I know what you are feeling. I am going to tell you something that may not bring comfort, but it is the truth. What is happening to the Senate worlds is a tragedy. It is also not our responsibility. We offered our help. We offered our protection. We were refused with contempt. Now the bill for that contempt has come due, and it is written in blood. Remember this moment." Remember that they laughed. "And remember that humanity survives because we look after our own first, last, and always." Carter out. The silence on the bridge was suffocating. Jake returned to his command chair, watching as Quellan Prime's distress signals grew more desperate, more frantic, until finally they stopped altogether. Another world gone. Another civilization reduced to a footnote in galactic history. 3 days later, the swarm consumed its 15th Senate world. The death toll had reached 3 billion. The remaining Senate members evacuated to fortified stations in deep space, abandoning their homeworlds to save what remained of their populations. The Galactic Senate, once the undisputed authority over 73 civilizations, had become a government in exile within a single month. The eldest prime sat alone in his quarters aboard the station designated as temporary Senate headquarters. His crystalline structure had dulled to a sickly gray, a physical manifestation of the despair that consumed him. A gentle chime announced a visitor. He did not have the energy to refuse. The observer entered, carrying a data tablet. "Prime, I have news. It is not good. I did not imagine it would be. The swarm has altered course. Our projections show it moving toward human space. They will reach the outer human colonies in approximately 2 weeks." The Prime felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but a hollow sort of sadness. "So we all fall together then. There is a certain justice in that." "Perhaps not, Prime." The observer activated the tablet, displaying a star chart. Human fleet movements over the past week have been unusual. They are not fortifying their colonies, they are evacuating them. Evacuating? To where? To a defensive line they have established here. The observer highlighted a section of space between human territory and the approaching swarm. "Prime, they are not running. They are choosing their battlefield." The Prime stood, his structure brightening slightly with interest. "How many ships have they positioned? Our intelligence is limited, but estimates suggest somewhere between 8,000 and 12,000 vessels. Prime, that is nearly their entire military capacity. They are committing everything to this single engagement. Against 20 million swarm ships? That is not strategy. That is suicide." "Yes, Prime, it is." The observer hesitated. "There is more. We intercepted a transmission from Ambassador Carter to the human fleet. It was not encrypted. I believe she wanted us to hear it. Play it." Lisa Carter's voice filled the room, clear and strong. "To all human forces. In 14 days we will face an enemy that has consumed 15 worlds and killed over 3 billion sentient beings. The Galactic Senate asked us once what humanity could contribute to galactic defense. They laughed at our answer. Today we will show them what we tried to tell them in that chamber. We will show them what it means to be human. We will show them that some species do not measure their worth by the length of their history or the size of their empires. Some species measure their worth by what they are willing to die for. Today humanity stands alone. We stand for our children, for our future, and for the principle that no species, no matter how young or small, should have to bow before the abyss. All ships, this is Ambassador Carter. Take your positions, make them count. And remember, we are the species that looked at the stars and decided they were not enough. We reached for them anyway. Today, we reach for victory. Carter out." The transmission ended. The eldest Prime felt that cold sensation again, but this time, it was different. This time, it felt like awe. "They are going to try to stop it," he whispered. "Not to save themselves. Not to prove us wrong. They are doing it because it needs to be done." "Yes, Prime. We were wrong about them." "Yes, Prime." The eldest Prime moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars that had once seemed so full of possibility. "Can we get a ship to their defensive line before the engagement begins? Prime, our fastest vessel would arrive 6 hours after the battle commences. Assuming there is anything left to arrive to. Prepare it anyway. I will go myself." "Prime, that is. I know what it is, Observer. It is too little too late. But I will not let humanity stand alone while I cower in safety. If they are willing to die for a galaxy that mocked them, the least I can do is witness their sacrifice." The human defensive line formed across a dozen star systems, a thin wall of metal and determination against an approaching tide of organic horror. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Liberty's Edge, now the flagship of the Third Fleet, positioned at the line's center point. Around him, 4,000 human ships held their positions with the kind of discipline that came from knowing this might be their last stand. Helen Price appeared at his side, her face grim but resolute. "All fleets report ready, Captain. The swarm will reach weapon range in 6 hours. Acknowledged. Pass the word, no ship retreats. No ship surrenders. We hold this line, or we die trying." "Aye, Captain." Jake pulled up the tactical display, studying the impossible odds one more time. 20 million enemy vessels against 12,000 human ships. The mathematics were brutal. Even if every human ship destroyed 1,000 swarm vessels before being destroyed, it would not be enough. But mathematics had never stopped humanity before. The first contact came exactly on schedule. Swarm scouts emerged from faster-than-light travel, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence as they assessed the human defensive line. Jake watched them on the tactical display, counting. 50 scouts, then 100, then 500. All ships weapons-free, fire at will. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Nuclear missiles streaked through space, their warheads optimized for maximum area of effect damage. Railgun rounds traveled at relativistic speeds, punching through organic hulls like paper. Energy weapons carved burning lines through the darkness, turning swarm scouts into expanding clouds of flash-frozen biomass. The scouts died by the hundreds, but they had already transmitted their findings. The main swarm began to arrive. They came in waves that defied comprehension. Millions of vessels, each one a nightmare of evolutionary efficiency designed for a single purpose: consume. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply advanced, an endless tide of hunger given form and purpose. The human fleet met them with fury that would have made their ancestors proud. This was not the careful, measured warfare of civilized species. This was primal, desperate, and absolutely ruthless. Human ships formed into tight defensive formations, overlapping their fire to create kill zones that destroyed thousands of swarm vessels per minute. When their ammunition ran low, they rammed. When their hulls breached, the crews sealed themselves in survival pods and manually detonated their reactors, taking dozens of enemy ships with them. Jake watched his fleet die one ship at a time. The third fleet had started with 4,000 vessels. 3 hours into the engagement, he commanded 700. The math was still impossible, but somehow, impossibly, they were holding the line. "Captain, we have a problem," Helen reported, her voice tight with tension. "The swarm is adapting. They are focusing fire on our command ships. They have identified our fleet structure, and they are decapitating it." Jake felt a cold certainty settle over him. All remaining ships switch to independent operation protocols. Break formation and engage at will. If they want to play that game, we will show them that every human ship is a command ship. Every human crew is capable of independent thought. That is something they will never understand. The human fleet scattered, becoming a swarm themselves. Individual ships or small groups hunted through the enemy formation, targeting the largest swarm vessels and using speed and maneuverability to offset their numerical disadvantage. It was chaos, but it was human chaos, unpredictable and impossible to counter with instinct alone. The eldest prime ship arrived in the middle of the 6th hour of combat. He stood on the bridge, watching in silent horror and admiration as humanity waged war unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. These were not the laughable newcomers who had stood before the Senate. These were predators, apex killers from a death world that had forged them in fire and blood for millions of years. "Observer," he said quietly. "Are they winning?" "No, Prime. They are dying, but they are taking an incredible toll. Our sensors indicate the swarm has lost approximately 40% of its total mass. The humans have destroyed 8 million enemy vessels. At what cost? 11,000 human ships have been destroyed or disabled. Prime, they have committed everything. There are no reserves, no reinforcements. When the last human ship falls, the swarm will proceed directly to Earth with minimal resistance." The eldest prime watched as another human vessel, its hull breached and burning, accelerated into a dense cluster of swarm ships and detonated. The explosion consumed hundreds of enemy vessels, a final defiant gesture from a dying crew. "They know this," he said. "They know they cannot win. They are doing it anyway." "Yes, Prime." Something broke inside the eldest prime. Some carefully maintained wall of pride and certainty crumbled, leaving only raw shame. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message on all frequencies. Maximum power. I want every ship in this system to hear it." "Prime, what should the message say?" The eldest prime straightened, his crystalline structure blazing with sudden light. "Tell them the Galactic Senate was wrong. Tell them we were fools who mistook age for wisdom and size for strength. Tell them that if they can hold for 6 more hours, the full Senate fleet will arrive to support them. Every ship we have left, every weapon, every resource. We are coming." Jake received the transmission in the middle of redirecting his remaining ships to plug a gap in the defensive line. He read it twice, not quite believing what he was seeing. Then he opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Morrison. The Senate fleet is inbound. 6 hours. We just need to hold for 6 more hours." The response came from 1,000 different ships, spoken in 100 different languages, but united in a single purpose. They would hold, not because the Senate had finally acknowledged them, not for gratitude or recognition. They would hold because that was what humans did when their backs were against the wall and the darkness pressed in from all sides. The next 6 hours were the longest of Jake's life. Liberty's Edge took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull breached in a dozen places. But they held. When the Senate fleet finally arrived, led by the eldest prime himself, they found 1,200 human ships still fighting, still holding the line, still refusing to break. The combined fleet turned the tide. With human tactics and Senate numbers, they shattered the swarm, driving it back system by system until finally, after 18 hours of continuous combat, the last swarm vessel was destroyed. Jake stood in the ruins of his bridge, surrounded by emergency lighting and the smell of burned electronics. Helen appeared beside him, her uniform torn and bloodied, but her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. Captain, Ambassador Carter is requesting all senior officers report to the Senate flagship for an emergency conference. Acknowledged. Helen, what did we just do? She smiled, tired but genuine. I think we just taught the galaxy what it means to be human, sir.